Hey, welcome everybody back to another podcast here. We're in Monterey County, continuing our Realtor series. We're talking to the Government Affairs Director, and we've got Adam Pinterits here today. Adam, how you doing?
Doing great, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Oh, we really appreciate you coming on. Yeah, like I said, we've been going to our five core counties and talking to the GADs and really trying to just get everybody to know what issues are out there, especially going into an election year. And hopefully not only just educate, but also get people engaged, right? So that's kind of the whole point of it. Why don't you go ahead and start us off, just maybe a little bit about yourself and how you kind of got here as the Government Affairs Director for MCAR.
Yeah, certainly. So I've been involved in local Monterey County politics for about 15 years. Previously, I was a campaign consultant and managed various election campaigns. So I came onto the job already knowing most of the elected officials in Monterey County, which was a great leg up. But what really drew me to MCAR and to the Realtors is the nonpartisan brand. It's the effort to move forward sensible policies, particularly to support housing, which is easily the most important topic in my mind.
Yeah, no, that's I was looking at your site, and you guys spell it out right there, right? Property rights, home ownership. And I guess, going into, first thing, maybe we take a look at some of the local topics here. And the one that stands out is the city council approving that rental registry. I've been getting a lot of questions on that. So this is great timing. Do you want to kind of just maybe go over what that entails, the actual registry itself, and maybe some of the concerns?
Yeah, absolutely. And, we just had another city council meeting about the Monterey rental registry just last night. So it really is a hot button topic right now. I'll take a step back for a moment and give a little bit of context and comparison. So the city of Salinas began developing their rental registry almost 2 years ago now. And, we're not in favor of that rental registry any more than we are in favor of the Monterey rental registry. But a very important difference is that the city of Salinas invited us to have a seat at the table. They formed a technical advisory committee, and we had about a year's worth of meetings where myself and property managers and tenants' rights advocates, basically stakeholders from all sides of the issue, got together for several meetings to discuss the nuances of a rental registry, what was important in that policy versus what could be left out, and how could we find a happy medium. So Salinas, even though we don't support rental registries on principle, Salinas at least gave us a seat at the table and created an ordinance that realtors and property managers and rental property owners can at least live with, is the general consensus on that. So that's been in stark contrast to the city of Monterey, which unfortunately chose not to form a technical advisory committee, despite requests that they do so. And frankly, they've been rushing this forward. I think they first proposed it on April 18th, and they're really trying to get it finalized. They tried to finalize it last night, and I called them out on a technicality. They're rushing through this process so much that they quite literally forgot to write in one of the amendments that they made last month. So the city council voted 4-1 to make an amendment so that essentially tenants couldn't just immediately sue their landlords for not registering on time, that there had to be a 30-day notice, right, so that we don't have all these frivolous lawsuits. They voted for that provision, for that amendment in the ordinance, and then forgot to write it in. So last night I went to the city council meeting and I called them out on this. I said, hey, you guys need to actually be on top of this. The issue with the Monterey rental registry is that it's being rushed through too quickly, and that they're not really taking the time to consider what impacts this is going to have on the community. And I've brought forth the city of Seattle as an example for rental registry conversations because we have a lot more data on what happens when you overregulate the rental market. Back in 2019 and 2020, the city of Seattle passed a number of rental regulations, including strengthening of the rental registry. And what happened since then? They've lost 6.14% of their overall rental inventory. They've lost 17% of their small mom and pop landlords. So it's really hitting that group of rental housing providers the hardest. And as a result of all this lost inventory in the Seattle rental market, the average rent has gone up about 25%. So these policies that are intended to help renters are in fact hurting them. And we're really concerned about that. We acknowledge that housing affordability and rental housing availability is a significant issue, but you can't regulate your way out of a housing problem, right? We need more housing supply, we need more inventory, and if anything, we need policies that entice property owners to rent rather than creating disincentives like this.
That's well said. Yeah, it seems like they are rushing it through. I'm surprised they're not looking for more input, because this doesn't happen in a vacuum. A lot of times, other counties are dealing with kind of similar things. San Mateo often dealing with rent control and this kind of thing. I think somebody had proposed a rental registry. I don't think it went anywhere. But Monterey is also kind of unique, right? Because in the city of Monterey itself, you've got 60% of the residents, right, who are renting. Carmel, right, and so talking about a real big kind of, I think, test case. A lot of counties are looking at you guys and saying, okay, how's this going to play out? But a lot, I think, people, are obviously concerned. There's privacy concerns. There's also just that concern about, is this the first step into like a rent control, right?
Absolutely. And it's funny because on April 18th, the city council in Monterey came right out and said, first, we're going to work on a rental registry ordinance. And then after that's implemented, we will begin considering other things such as rent control or just cause eviction restrictions, or a vacancy tax. They came right out and said it on April 18th. It's been interesting watching them try and backtrack and backpedal a little bit, because ever since the outcry that came from that meeting, they've really tried to tiptoe around the subject of rent control and pretend as though that's not what's coming next, even though they came right out and said it. So we're deeply concerned about the direction it's going, because it's been repeatedly demonstrated that rent control doesn't work. The problem with rent control policies is that, again, it disincentivizes people from providing rental housing, right? So it hurts the rental market in the inventory sense. But then it also disincentivizes property owners from reinvesting and updating their properties. And so over time, with a rent control ordinance, what you will get is properties that are in decline. And that doesn't just affect renters and doesn't just affect landlords. It also affects the entire neighborhood, right? Property owners who have nothing to do with rental housing, who are happily living in their owner-occupied homes, those homes are going to lose value if the neighboring home is dilapidated. So our concern is that this is all headed in that direction, and we're seeing it on the statewide level too. So,
and Adam, is it in stone now? Because I had read even that, like, is it mandatory in terms of landlords? Or I had said that before. I think they had a provision that said it would be like a misdemeanor if you didn't register. I think that maybe they got rid of that, but
that's absolutely right. Yeah, originally they had a provision that there would be misdemeanor charges if you didn't register. We talked with the city council members and got that part removed. And very importantly, we were also able to talk them into adding an exemption for the smaller mom and pop landlords. So if you own 3 or fewer rental housing units in the city of Monterey, then you can file for an exemption from the rental registry ordinance. So that was a really key compromise. We were really glad that they were at least willing to meet us halfway on that particular subject, although we did ask for much more and didn't get it. And so we're just seeing this issue where the attitude among a lot of local politicians is, we have to do something, right, about housing. We have to do something. We can't do nothing. So, hey, let's try this. And they're even acknowledging that this is an experiment, a $500,000 experiment on the taxpayer's dime.
That is, and that's a great example of the great work you and the government affairs directors do in our counties, right? I mean, if somebody wasn't pointing this out and showing up and calling them out on this, these are the kind of things that all of a sudden get, put into place. And once you put something in place like that, it seems it's very hard oftentimes to get rid of, policies, even when they're going in the maybe antithetical or going in the wrong direction of what we want here. You mentioned, Adam, at the end of the day, we need more housing, right? It's really simple as that, but how to get there. But it kind of transitions in, because there is a resolution that's been reintroduced, right, by, I think, Jimmy Panetta and Mike Kelly, Jimmy Panetta being representative from Carmel Valley. And it's called the Mor Homes on the Market Act. And essentially what my understanding would that be is it would raise the capital gains, right? so that you could go ahead and get more inventory because people could actually sell their homes. Those empty nesters and everyone, could actually sell and for retirees downsize because as it is right now, it's what only 250,000, I think, is exclusion, but this would raise that, right?
That's correct. So right now, the capital gains exemption is 250,000 for singles, or 500,000 for a married couple. What the Mor Homes on the Market Act would do would be to double those capital gains exemptions for primary residences only. But exactly like you said, Dave, it would free people up from being effectively trapped in their homes. So folks could downsize to something more appropriate. Let's say if they're empty nesters, or if they decided, they'd really like to move somewhere else, but they would feel so punished by being taxed on what is essentially their life savings, right? But a lot of people invest everything in their home, and it may even be their retirement plan. So to punish people for having made that investment, it just doesn't make sense in an era where we're desperately constrained in terms of inventory. And so this makes sense on a lot of levels, right? It can help people out from the tax perspective, but it can also help. It's a very creative policy solution to try and address our inventory problem. And inventory really is at the heart of all of these issues.
Right.
Rental registry, housing affordability. It comes down to the fact that on the Monterey Peninsula, we have been underbuilding by about 50% for 30 or so years now. So there's the projected amount of housing that's needed. And consistently back in the 80s and 90s, every 10 years, we were building, well over 1,000 housing units. Now we're consistently well below 500 for every decade on average since then. So the problem isn't that, somehow landlords or property owners or sellers are greedy, right? Which is sort of the common narrative from politicians. And it's what they're using to justify all of this overregulation and all of these proposals like rent control. The problem is that the predecessors of the current politicians did not do enough to create more housing. And so we have severe inadequacy in our housing inventory. And we're also seeing that reflected in the RENA numbers, right? The Regional Housing Needs Allocation. That's the mandate by the state that every local city and county must plan for adequate housing. They don't have to build any of it, but they have to have the zoning and the planning policies in place to allow for adequate housing to be built. And citizens who attend public meetings about the current cycle of RENA allocations are outraged because, for example, their cities are being expected in the RENA allocation to accommodate for thousands of units of new housing. And understandably, that can make residents and property owners afraid, right? Is there suddenly going to be a high-rise apartment building right next door to their single-family residence, right? People get concerned about the character of their community and the city they live in. And I totally understand that. What's important for them to remember is that the housing allocation and the housing element cycles don't actually require any new construction. And in fact, even though that the city of Monterey is expected to accommodate for thousands of new housing units in their planning process, the reality is that they're going to be lucky to build a few dozen. And the reason why in Monterey County is water.
That's a great point. I was just about to say, in terms of water, because there's a cease and desist order, right, from using Carmel River by the California State Water Board. Is that kind of?
Yeah, that's right, Dave. So the state ordered that California American Water, the company that serves the Monterey Peninsula with water as a water provider, that they needed to cease and desist from pumping their main water source, which was the Carmel River. And the problem with that is that we don't have an alternative source that's ready to take over the needs for current residents, let alone for future growth in housing, which we sorely need. So what's happened is that water politics has been leveraged by people who oppose growth as a way of basically shutting down all opportunities for new development. If you don't have the water credits, you can't build it on the Monterey Peninsula. And very few places have water credits. The city of PG has a few. The city of Marina recently used a lot of their water credits. They're on a different water system, so they're able to do that. But if you're trying to build a home or remodel a home or add a bathroom anywhere in Seaside or Monterey or Pacific Grove or Carmel, you're going to run into some significant issues unless you have water credits attached to that property. And what's worse is that actually the water district has been very reluctant to provide information about the water credits available to properties. So that's another layer of the issue that we're trying to address and work with the water district to help property owners understand, do they have water credits available? Can they add that bathroom? And if they can't, what do they need to get there? But it's a significant struggle, and it's a big part of the reason why we've been underbuilding for the past 30 years.
Right. It seems like we all know what the problem is, but we can't get to a compromise or a solution with all of this in place. I don't understand. I actually was surprised when you said that. I know that they were doing their planning, for all 12 cities, right? That's state law. But I didn't realize that they didn't have actually any mandatory building of it, where it's not actually required. So that's kind of shocking to me. But what do you, how do you kind of move forward on that? I mean, that's going on right now, right? The actual planning, is it like up to December or this year?
That's right. So, but before the end of the year, local cities in the county need to have their updated housing elements submitted to the state for review. And it looks like most of them are going to make it on time. A few of them might be late. The consequences for being late, or for not even updating your housing element at all, potentially first include not being eligible for various funds and grants from the state. So, we shoot ourselves in the foot by not complying with this mandate. The other potential threat, however, is if a city is significantly delinquent in updating their housing elements, then developers can potentially leverage what's called the builder's remedy. So they would apply through the state for ministerial approval. And what that essentially means is loss of local control. So I've been telling the people who are opposed to the RENA updates and the housing element updates, who say they don't want the state mandate, forcing their community to change. I've been telling them, well, actually, the best way to retain local control and make sure that you have a say in what gets built in your community is if you do update the housing element, right? This is our chance for our communities to envision how they would like to grow. And I know some people don't want it to grow at all, but that's just not realistic because we desperately need housing.
Yeah, we've been, some of the other counties, I was kind of surprised to hear the kind of the pushback that was going on at the local level. They don't, citing concerns like traffic, which are real concerns, but you just can't ignore the need to build, right, for new housing. It's just, it's such an enormous. Now, you mentioned all these, the Mor Homes on the Market Act, and the registry. So going, into next year, Adam, is these the kind of things that, going into like Ledge Day in May, that you'll be advocating? Is that kind of the main legislative agenda for MCAR at the state level?
In general, the idea is going to be to advocate for more housing production. We'll see just how much all of the conversations about rental regulations and overregulation of housing, how much that takes up our bandwidth. But our priority is always home ownership housing in terms of advocacy. And so when it comes to things like Legislative Day, the Mor Homes on the Market Act that you mentioned from Congressman Jimmy Panetta is a great example of that. So this year in May, realtors from all across the country went to Washington, D.C. for our National Association of Realtors Legislative Day. And every single realtor from all across the country was all told the same thing. We need to get more Congresspeople to support Jimmy Panetta's bill, the Mor Homes on the Market Act. So the Central Coast should be really proud of the fact that the National Association of Realtors has made supporting our congressman's bill the top priority this year. And since that visit to Capitol Hill, and since thousands of realtors went and spoke to their congressman to support the bill, he has in fact signed on, I think it's 28 new co-sponsors. So realtors made a significant impact by engaging with their legislators and participating in Legislative Day. They were able to ensure that this bill moves forward. Now, we don't know if it'll pass, but it's gotten significantly further this year than it did last year. And if it doesn't pass this year, then I expect that, I hope that it'll be introduced, and I would expect that that we would support it then as well. But also looking into next year and the elections, we're very concerned about a lot of the statewide ballot measures. So as much as we're trying to advocate for smart, sensible solutions to housing issues locally, we're seeing on the statewide level that the legislature is trying the same attitude of, well, we have to do something. So one of the biggest threats that's next on the 2024 ballot is going to be the potential removal of Costa-Hawkins. Costa-Hawkins is the act that protects single-family residences from most of these rental housing regulations. And that's going to severely disincentivize anyone from renting out a single-family residence. Now, from a realtor's perspective, the silver lining here is, hey, we might have more single-family homes to sell for home ownership housing. So there's a potentially good side to this, but we're concerned that overall this is going to hurt the local housing market because renters who are already struggling to find available homes for rent and to afford them, that situation's only going to get worse with the removal of Costa-Hawkins as owners decide to exit the rental housing market.
Yeah, that Costa-Hawkins, we have talked about that in the past. I mean, that's a big thing, right? It's kind of the last domino that would fall that would stop, right? Rent control. And that's going to be interesting. So, I mean, it's going to be an interesting year next year with all this, a lot on the ballot. And, I think it's a great example, though, of, agents needing to be educated and understand, right, the importance of getting out there and supporting these resolutions. Otherwise, some of this stuff, it's gonna affect them for sure. It's gonna affect real estate, their business. So if you don't get involved and engaged now, you can't really blame anyone when it goes the wrong way.
That's exactly right, Dave. And I think it's very important for realtors to get involved, particularly next year, and to also leverage their networks, right? Who is better in getting people involved in the community than realtors, right? You've sold people their homes. You're involved in your communities. You do volunteer work. Realtors are so connected with their communities that they are the perfect ambassadors for this message. So I would really encourage every single realtor that's listening to this, just set aside a few hours of time over the course of 2024 to share some information with your friends, your family members, your neighbors, your clients, right? Just let them know what's happening and how it's going to affect people. If you sold someone their investment property, if you sold someone a home that they are now renting out, let them know that these issues on the ballot are going to significantly impact their investment so that they can make an informed decision about what to do with their investment, but also about how to vote in next year's election.
Right. Educate, engage, get out and vote. And, so I guess kind of to wrap this up, it's been a great discussion, Adam. But so going into 2024, that is such a big part of it, engagement. So for the realtor out there, I know you guys, have, on the MCAR website, various things how to get engaged, right? But is it just as simple as, showing up to some of the meetings, and being heard, and then also leading up to Ledge Day, obviously is a main point. Realtors, how I guess is the next step if I'm a realtor out there in Monterey County, I want to get more involved. Where do they go, basically?
So realtors should really pay attention. All of our association emails and newsletters and action alerts all have MCAR in the subject line so that we make it really easy to pick out. When you see an email that says MCAR in the subject line, please just take a minute, open that up. I promise you, we don't spam people with excessive amounts of information. We just try to give people what they need to know in order to take action and be informed. So keep an eye out for those emails. If you aren't a member or if you don't receive those emails, please contact me. My email is Adam, ADAM, at mcar.com. And I can either help get you caught up on the information, or if you're having trouble receiving our emails, I'm happy to help sort that out too. We're trying really hard, not just to engage realtors, but also engage the wider community and educate them about these issues. And so I'm more than happy to be a resource and to answer people's questions.
Fantastic. Adam Pinterits, Monterey County Association of Realtor, GAD, Government Affairs Director. You do a great job. I really enjoyed this discussion. And I think this is exactly why we do this show, these podcasts, is to get people informed and hopefully get them engaged going into the election year for next year. So I want to thank you again, Adam. You're always welcome to come on if you guys ever want to talk about anything going on in the county of Monterey. But I just want to say thanks. And to everybody out there, thanks for tuning in. Get engaged, contact Adam, and keep an eye out for, future podcasts. We'll be taking on topics like this, rental registries and so forth. And keep an eye out on that, Contra Costa and Mor Homes in the Market Act, which I think is going to be a big news, at least one day. So thanks again, Adam, and thanks everybody at home tuning in.
Thanks, Dave. Have a great day.
You too.